you think about drug addiction as a whole, there's got to be something that gives within each individual. Hello everybody, my name is Pej. I'm a drug interventionist. I help people with drug addiction, alcoholism, mental health, and other disorders. Today we want to talk about drug addiction as a whole. I kind of felt compelled to not just specify and talk about one certain drug today, but let's talk about all drugs, addiction as a whole, and why it's out there, and how it runs rampant. I feel compelled to talk about this because I myself am a former addict. I am in recovery. I was in the grips of my addiction for a long time. I was stuck on all kinds of stupid, I'm talking like meth, heroin, cocaine, lots of weed, alcohol. I didn't discriminate. Like I did almost every type of drug that came in my path, hallucinogens, all of that. And I do realize that when I was growing up, I felt like my self-esteem was really low, and also I was also very captivated by the types of things that my friends were doing, at least my friends at the time, and what they were using. It obviously just started with weed and alcohol. I was huffing gas at a very young age too. I feel like there was some kind of escape that I was seeking, but over a period of time I just followed what everybody was doing, and it became hallucinogens. There was that era where there was people in our school that were doing acid and mushrooms, and then it just kind of went on into other things. It became cocaine, which then became meth, which later I tried heroin, and then actually opium too, which I developed a dependency and an addiction towards. So I think about like my experience, as some would call it, my drug using career. Why is it that I became such a hardcore addict, and what was it about it? Like, was it a phase? It certainly wasn't a phase unless you count almost 2 decades as a phase. Or was it something that I was trying to cover up, some kind of pain, something that I was trying to numb out? And truth be told, I had a lot of trauma. It wasn't any kind of sexual trauma, or there was a lot of verbal and physical abuse within my household. That was definitely traumatic. But I also had something that had happened to me at a very young age, where I was involved in something. I was driving, and somebody lost their life as a result of me having a car accident. And it wasn't right away, but they died about 4 days later. And so I was already using and drinking casually, but at this point I went off the Richter. I would just use in excess. I wanted to numb out. I didn't want to feel. And so I'm a full-blown addict. Like, that's just what I became. And it hadn't yet quite become a problem in my life, or at least it didn't appear to be a problem in my life, because I was still managing to live. I was still moving from one place to the other. I was able to live everyday life, but I was also selling drugs in order to nurture my addiction. And so that life went on for a certain amount of time. But when you become a full-blown addict and you're going hard, like really hard, or your addiction just keeps expanding, it's hard not to stop. And then you can't become your best customer when you are selling drugs, because then you are pretty much using your own supply. And that's what happened later on into my 30s. I was getting into lots and lots of heavy drugs, especially meth, a lot more, which actually was my demise. And it controlled my life for a long time, a long time, to the point where I was not productive in the workplace. At least I tended to think that I was productive, but really it was all just a facade. I just couldn't move forward. I couldn't do much. I wasn't doing very well in school. I tried to go back to college several times. I couldn't stay awake in class because I'd be up for days on end partying and not being able to put anything together. My brain capacity was usually depleted from hours and hours of staying up, or days and days of partying, and so I wasn't able to do much with my life. And my addiction pretty much became the most important thing to me. I would go above and beyond to just use drugs. And as I said, I didn't discriminate. When I was regularly using meth, I was in a garage one time in Southern California, waiting for someone to show up with some more meth, because we had run out. And he said I couldn't get meth, but let's do crack. And I'm like, sure, no problem. So whatever was in front of me, pretty much, like, I would do it. Anything to get out of right here, right now, and not have to feel. And so what happened? What happened that I decided to stop doing drugs? So there was a series of events that happened that I believe were signs to push me in the direction of asking to change my life. I had already failed out of art school, and I was an artist at the time. There was certain people that had gotten sober that were telling me that I should possibly get sober. One of them actually told me if I didn't get sober, I had no place in her life. and she was a good friend of mine, and it kind of hurt my feelings. But she said she was a few years sober and that I should really explore that. So one of the things that I feared the most was to raise my hands and ask for help. But when I actually asked for help, I then went and got help. And it was in a recovery home. It was like a treatment center, if you will. And they just taught me how to live a different life. Now, during the time of being there, it didn't take but long for me to work through a lot of my trauma and make this decision that I want to help people that suffer from drug addiction and from alcoholism. People that were very much going through the other stuff that I had been going through throughout my life, and I wanted to be there for them. And so, I went to school and I studied drug and alcohol studies, and I worked on the front lines of addiction and alcoholism, and I engulfed myself in the recovery process. And over the years, I'm a little over 14 years sober now. I've seen a lot of different people come with a lot of different disorders and addictions. I've worked in a lot of different treatment centers where they are dual diagnosis, specializing in co-occurring disorders, not just addiction, not just alcoholism, but what the underlying roots are, what the other underlying causes are of people's addiction, and what kind of stuff people are carrying around with them. And so, seeing over the years, like working in treatment, I've seen people come in for alcoholism. Definitely lots of people. Usually you get an older crowd that comes in for alcoholism in this day and age. And then, every so often somebody might have marijuana addiction and their family is trying to get in front of their addiction in order for it to not become more. They will put them in treatment. But it's not that often that you see somebody go to treatment for marijuana addiction. But the common thread that I've seen in treatment, as far as like the addiction that tops them all, is opiates. There are a lot of people that I have witnessed that it was heroin addiction a good 10 years ago. There wasn't this fentanyl craze, but more recently it's fentanyl. And so if you don't know what fentanyl is, it's basically one of the most strongest forms of opiates. And when people use it, it's deadly. They're using it because it captivates their minds, and it sedates them. It puts them in a state of, they're just sedated, like to the point where they could overdose very easily and die. And I don't think that people really think that will happen to them, or they're not afraid to do it, and they're not afraid of death. I've seen lots of opiates. That's definitely an addiction. And meth, that's a very common one too. There are a lot of, and usually I can talk, I've had my share of opiates in the past, but like when it comes to the person that becomes a meth addict, I'm able to talk with them because I relate so much more, because I was a meth addict for almost 18 years with like a 2-year break. So I got to keep my teeth. I've experienced seeing people from all walks of life, from all across the country, that come into the treatment setting, and we talk extensively about how they used, why they used, how long they were out there, if they did it intravenously by shooting it, if they were eating it, if they were smoking it. When it comes to meth, it can be done in many different ways and styles. And then seeing people come off of this stuff, like what kinds of detoxes there are. When it comes to methadone, like this is not an easy detox. If somebody is on a high dosage of methadone, like I've seen people, at 170 milligrams of methadone go into a treatment setting and try to come off of that. It almost looks like they need an exorcism because it's so painful. There's just so much that goes into it, and coming off of it can take days and weeks on end. And when it comes to an opiate addiction, there's a lot of people that will come into treatment and they will want to get the help that they need, and they will end up getting detoxed, and sometimes they'll stay for a little bit longer. But it's fascinating to see how once they start feeling a little bit better, then they'll go right back out and they'll go use again, the very thing that they came to get detoxified from. So you think about drug addiction as a whole, there's got to be something that gives within each individual. First of all, it's really hard to actually ask for help. Most opiate addicts ask for help because they have run out of options, and because they do not want to go through the withdrawals, sometimes labeled as dope sick. People that use meth. I often get messages on my TikTok. People ask me, how do I stay off of this? I've been trying to stop. What did you do? I've seen some of your videos. And I tell them, like, I had to make an absolute decision. First and foremost, like, I did the thing that I really, really feared, and that was to call someone for help. Somebody that was knowledgeable, somebody that was skilled, somebody that was a professional. And I asked them please, or somebody. First I called somebody to put me in the hands of the professional. And when I talked to the professional, they told me, you're not going to, more often than none, somebody that wants to reside in their own home is pretty much in the lion's den, where it's their comfort zone, and they're going to keep getting high, and they can convince themselves over and over again that they're not going to do it anymore. But the next thing you know, day in, day out, they'll put a few days together, and then all of a sudden, there they are again, they're high. I had to make an absolute decision. I tell them, like, this is something where I had to separate myself from my comfort zone, from my own home, and go to a place where I was safe, where people were overlooking me, where I could have a nice, safe detox, where I could, kind of get my head together and be able to do the work on the back end that was required and still is required in order for me to stay sober and have a sober life. I know that a lot of people carry a lot of misery with them, a lot of pain, a lot of anguish, a lot of guilt. And so they want to numb out, they want to use. And I often tell them, is this the way that we were intended to live? We didn't come on this earth so that we would be stuck on some kind of substance. Another addiction, obviously there's a lot of cocaine that I've seen people are addicted to. It's usually from the people that use it are from different walks of life. Some are high caliber, some people are from the streets. Their cocaine addiction turns into a full-blown crack addiction. And crack is still out there. It's still running rampant. There's a lot of people that have crack addiction. Crack has this like the stronghold on you. When you do it, it's exactly what you may have learned in your junior high school health class. It's addictive. It's highly addictive. Doing a line of cocaine is addictive within itself. When you have it in a rock form and you smoke it, you can't get enough. It's short-lived. It's only about 10 minutes, if that, and then once it's done, you want to do everything to get more. A lot of addicts and alcoholics, more addicts are notorious for stealing things. They will steal their family's jewelry. They'll break into homes. They'll go above and beyond to be able to get some kind of money, however that may be, in an illegal way, to be able to get their supply, to meet with the plug, as they call them these days. We used to call them the drug dealer. But regardless of the fact, it's not hard for people to obtain drugs. They will come up, addicts are creative. They will come up with ways to get money so that they can buy drugs. And they'll steal from their parents. They'll steal from stores. They'll steal anything to be able to get their drugs and use them. And then let's talk about Suboxone. Suboxone is a drug that it's an opiate blocker. And basically when people are coming off of opiates, they will use Suboxone as an alternative to methadone. Methadone was a more traditional, was used back in, probably the last 30 years, I believe, and people were using that to get off of heroin. However, you can develop a dependency upon that too, and that's even harder to get. When it comes to Suboxone, it was originally intended for a 7 to 10 day detox, and then you're supposed to taper off and get off of Suboxone. However, these days, because of harm reduction for people who have had years of extensive addiction to opiates, sometimes people will stay on Suboxone for an extended period of time, sometimes a few years. I'm not really a fan of that. I to each their own. I support medication-assisted treatment. However, I believe that Suboxone's purpose will be served best if it's used for 7 to 10 days for a detox, and then a person can get off of all substances as a whole and just stay sober. And there's a lot of work to be done in order for that person to stay sober. So if you or somebody that you know is suffering with drug addiction and doesn't know how to go about getting better, please, by all means, you can contact me, you can call me, we can talk and try to get you the help that you need.